Sounds good. All right, welcome everyone to the Atlanta Microsoft Power BI group. This is the first meeting of this year 2022, and hope everyone had a great new year, and wish everyone a happy new year and a healthy one this year. So, and if anyone has any announcements about the jobs or anything that you want to ask questions before we start the presentation, probably you can unmute yourself and then ask, or you can put it in the chat and we can ask, can announce. So if anybody has any kind of a job postings that they want to announce before. And as we, as Theo mentions, in every meeting we are looking for speakers as well. So if you have interest in speaking, please get involved and put in a request to add yourself to the meetings in the future, and you can present at this group. And in recent times, Power BI has added Spark lines and hybrid tables that we don't have Theo to show today, so we'll do it next month when he presents the meeting next month. And this month it's going to be Power BI Paginated Reports by Paul Turley. And I'm sure everybody knows Paul, with great involvement. He's an MVP, and he's been in the Microsoft BI community for a long time. And next meeting is implementing scorecards by Theo himself, and also he will do the Spark lines and the hybrid tables next month. And that's all I have right now. And if anyone has any kind of a job announcement, or if anybody's looking for a job, please unmute yourself and speak right now. And if you're not going to be speaking, please mute yourself so that we'll not have any disturbance in this meeting. And there is a global Power BI summit coming up in March 7th through the 11th. And we will be sending out the details for registration and stuff like that. It's an online conference run by Reza Rad and his group out of New Zealand. It's a great event. Last year it was awesome. Paul, you also spoke there, right, Paul? In one of those. Paul is on mute.
Oh, I got dropped out of the team meeting for just a minute. I just came back, Damu, so I missed the last 2 minutes.
Okay, so I was just talking about the Global Power BI Summit. You spoke last year, I think.
Yeah, that's coming up in.
That's coming up in March 7th through the 11th. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then later part of the year is going to be this community summit for the past SQL Server Community Summit coming up. So that's all I have for the announcements. And just stop sharing. And if anyone has any questions regarding any of the events or any questions regarding Power BI, please go ahead and ask before we start the presentation, actually in about a few minutes. Did anybody participate in the 25 days of DAX challenge online? That was fun. Done by Ruth. at the Kerbal. Not, I think she's starting again on this month. So if you want to participate, it's kerbal.com. You can go, have some fun with the DAX. So quick show of hands, if have you guys used the paginated reports in your projects? How many of you used? Can you put a raise your hand? Wow, a lot of people are using it already. Nice. And anybody using the Power BI premiums? So no, Paul, you're on mute.
Thank you, Damu. I was just going to ask that question in a slightly different way. Of those of you who are using paginated reports, are you using premium capacity or premium per user? You can just chat your
Yeah,
answer.
put it in the chat. Like Gladden says, combination. Anybody using paginated reports in premium per user capacity or premium capacity, Ed?
Mm-hmm. Of course you are, Ed.
Ed gets some special stuff. Class of user, premium will be using paginated reports soon. Okay, nice. A lot of people are on premium capacity.
That's where Microsoft wants us.
Definitely, yeah. They get the big bucks.
Well, that's true. That's where all the good stuff is.
Yeah. I think premium per user and premium capacity is pretty much just almost the same environment, right? Except
Yeah, with very few exceptions.
exceptions.
Like with premium per user, you really do get all of the features of premium capacity, just a different licensing mode.
Yeah. Just can share basically.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be good environment for testing premium stuff for in dev and test kind of situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be useful. Yeah. All right. Okay, now you can all put your hands down, and then if there is any questions, please raise your hand and you can unmute yourself, or you can put the questions in the chat window. Either way is fine. I can ask. if you don't want to be on the mic.
Damu, I'm ready to get started anytime you
Yeah,
are
we can
ready for me
start
to do that.
now. I think pretty much. All right. So welcome, Paul, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Damu. Damu and I have quite a bit of history together. We've known each other for many years. Been around the PAS community, the Microsoft Data Platform community, as we have with Teo and Ed and a number of folks. So even though I've resided on the West Coast most of my life, I've spent a bit of time in Atlanta and have made some good friends out there and familiar with your community. I've had an opportunity to present at some user groups in the past and SQL Saturdays. So I appreciate the good work that you folks do in Atlanta. So as Damo said, my name is Paul Turley. I'm a member of the Microsoft MVP community. I'm a principal consultant with Three Cloud Solutions, formerly Pragmatic Works. We were acquired about 2 years ago. And I'm going to turn off my camera. I had a video glitch just not long ago. I had to drop out of Teams and rejoin. So I'm going to try to not take any chances as much as I can. But I actually have two presentations that I'm going to borrow some slides from. I'll readily admit that I've been in vacation mode for the past 2 weeks since Teo had asked me to do this presentation. I've had real good intentions of putting together another deck, and I have put together some demonstrations, but I'm going to cherry pick for the last couple of conference presentations that I've done on similar topics. So excuse me jumping around just a little bit, but promise to share some good stuff with you. So as you can see, this is the deck that I had prepared for the last PAS Community Summit, which was in this past November. Just very quickly, if you have not been along for the journey with PAS over the past several years, PAS, the Professional Association for SQL Server, have sponsored SQL Saturdays, the PAS Summit, which for the past several years has been in the Seattle area, but has been several other cities, the largest gathering of Microsoft data professionals in the world. But with the onset of the pandemic, the PAS organization suffered some financial hardships and actually went insolvent about a half ago. And but the community was revitalized now under the control of Redgate Software, and we're back again. But the name has been changed just a little bit for legal reasons. So we are now the PAS Community Summit. So this, like I said, this was a presentation that I had done in November. So you'll see some references to things that don't necessarily pertain to our meeting tonight. But this presentation, which I'm going to walk through very, very quickly, was actually a little bit of reminiscing about the product known as SQL Server Reporting Services, which has been rebranded as it's been integrated into the Power BI platform as Paginated Reports. SSRS is still a thing. Microsoft will continue to support it for many years, we hope, as long as SQL Server continues to be available. But with the success of the Power BI platform, we now see the integration of reporting services reports in the Power BI service called Paginated Reports. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but we're going to go back and talk about some history very quickly before we get to demonstrations. Now, who am I? I started out actually in the television news business. That was my major in college. It's what my interest right out of high school was making TV. And I love to do that. I love pushing buttons and making pictures, but actually had an accident. I was not able to continue to do that job. I ended up working the help desk for a small software startup in Arizona who made healthcare software. And that got me into IT and then into IT training and then eventually into BI analytics. In 2009, after writing a number of books, both as a lead author and solo author, books about SQL Server and reporting services, I was welcomed into the MVP programs. That was 11 years ago. And eventually went to work for a company called Pragmatic Works based in the Jacksonville, Florida area, working remotely for them. I grew up in Washington State. And Pragmatic Works, about a year and a half ago, was acquired by 3Cloud Solutions. And happily working for 3Cloud, large and very quickly growing consulting company. We are the largest Microsoft Gold partner, 100% committed to the Azure platform. And we're hiring. But little shameless promotion there. If you're interested, you can reach out to me. Earlier this year, my wife and I decided to do something kind of crazy, and we decided we needed a diversion. We wanted to do something different, and so we sold the house and literally put life on the road. And so in May of this year, we went mobile. We purchased a motorhome, which I'm in right now, and we call it the Data Bus. And we traveled across the United States. Actually, spent a little bit of time in Atlanta a few months ago. Traveled down to Orlando to present at a conference, the Live 360 conference, and we went back to Los Angeles to spend some time with our daughter over the holidays, and that's where I am now, actually in Northridge, California, presenting to you from the Data Bus. So that's who I am and what I'm doing. I maintain two blogs, SQL Server BI.blog. This is my technical blog. And we're kind of sharing our travel experience and particularly video interviews with community leaders in the data space at dataontheroad.blog. So I'd encourage you to check that out if you'd like to do that. All right, enough about me. So these are my blogs again. SQL Server BI blog and dataontheroad.blog. So let's talk very briefly about reporting services. I'm going to ask everybody very quickly just to post one word in the chat window to describe your previous experience with SQL Server reporting services. Longtime expert, been using it a long time, novice, haven't used it. Just pick a word or a phrase just to describe your journey with reporting services, just to give me an idea of what this audience looks like in terms of a previous experience. Okay, appreciate it. And appreciate the honesty, and it's good to know kind of where everybody's been. Back in 2003, I was getting started with teaching myself to develop using the .NET framework. I was developing a website, working for a training organization as a Microsoft certified trainer at the time. And I was commuting to Seattle via ferry. And I continue. Thank you, everyone. It looks like we've got a good cross section of folks across the spectrum in terms of previous experience. So I was commuting by ferry boat across the Puget Sound to work every day in Seattle. And a good friend of mine who actually worked for the Walt Disney Company in Seattle, they have a data center there, handed me a bootlegged CD. And it was a preview copy of this product that Microsoft were working on. I won't mention his name since it was a bootleg copy of an early version of SQL Server Reporting Services. And I fell in love with this product. I installed it. I hooked up to a SQL Server, started building some reports. I was so impressed with this product that it hadn't even been announced yet, let alone released, that I reached out to some friends at Microsoft and eventually found the product group leader a gentleman by the name of Jason Carlson, who actually was kind of the chief architect of reporting services. And I said, this is a fantastic product. I would love to write a book about this. And so we ended up writing the first RocksPress book on SQL Server Reporting Services. Reporting Services went to general availability in 2004. It was a free add-in product, a reporting tool for SQL Server 2000 at the time. And you could either purchase a CD or download it and install it. It was bundled in SQL Server 2005. It continued to improve and mature. In 2008, again, it was bundled and updated. It was a fairly significant update. One of the most significant updates of reporting services came with SQL Server 2008 R2. They improved the XMLA or the XML namespace quite a bit to include a lot of new features. They improved the charting capabilities, a lot of the visualization capabilities with things like spark lines, which we just got in Power BI. These were added in 2010 to reporting services as part of the 2008 R2 release. Some minor improvements in 2012. 2016 saw a lot of modernization. Microsoft had purchased a product called DataZen. They borrowed a lot of that IP and they added some mobile reporting capabilities. And then in 2017, we saw the advent of Power BI Report Server, a version of SQL Server Reporting Services that would allow you to actually deploy Power BI reports on-prem to your report servers. And then in 2018, just 3 years ago, we saw the introduction of Paginated Reports, or reporting services reports that could be integrated into the cloud-based Power BI service. And then just last year, the beginning of the year, we saw the introduction of Power BI Premium per user, which really kind of opened things up quite a bit since Paginated Reports was announced as a premium-only feature, which was a bit of a roadblock, particularly for smaller organizations that couldn't cost justify investing in premium capacity. So that's the journey that we've been on. Now, may seem a little self-promoting, but I'm doing this for a reason. I want to step back and show you some of the presentations I've done at previous past summits about reporting services. In 2003, I'm sorry, I had to quote this song in so many words. Late December, back in 2003, what a very special time for me. We wrote a book, and this was the first edition of our RocksPress book on SQL Server Reporting Services. Now, somebody else who runs your user group there, Teo Lachiev, also wrote a book. I believe it was published in 2005. Excellent book on reporting services as well. And I have to nod to a number of the other authors who worked very, very hard to write books on reporting services. We updated that book in 2005, then again in 2008. And so that kind of brings us back to thinking about, how mature this product really has been. I had presented sessions about reporting services and advanced report design techniques at 8 different past conferences up through 2017. And here they are. Again, I promised to kind of walk through this very quickly, but the theme of a number of these presentations was, rather than creating a report per requirement, using more advanced techniques that we can use to combine reports together, to create a consolidated report that can meet multiple requirements by doing things like hiding or dynamically showing columns, changing the way that we group things, changing the way that we filter and we sort data. And, a lot of these were fairly advanced techniques that utilized expressions within reporting services. And expressions in reporting services are written, because there's a fairly dated product, in visualstudio.net. But we could use expressions to drive almost all of the properties within reporting services. There are some, 400, 500 some different properties in reporting services that are used to hide things, to show things, change colors and borders and backgrounds, grouping, sorting, filtering, etc. And so, again, Before Power BI was released, reporting services was the tool that we generally used to create scorecard and dashboard style reports. These reports could be based not only on a relational database product like SQL Server or Oracle, but also on an analytic database like SQL Server Analysis Services, using query languages like MDX rather than SQL. And and so on. This was kind of the architecture that we thought about when architecting BI solutions. As far back as 2003. I mean, operational databases. We would create ETL packages, populated data warehouse, build OLAP cubes, now what we now call semantic models, and then reports would sit on top of that. And again, reporting services was the tool that we would use. Now, we recognize that there were really kind of two different schools of thought when it came to building BI solutions. Adhering to strict discipline, doing it right, playing by the rules, making sure that everything was very secure, or just, and this is an old reference, you'd have to be of a certain age to relate to Larry the Cable Guy, just get her done. Just get the job done, which from a business perspective is really kind of the priority. It's not about spending months and months to apply DevOps, to apply strict discipline, but just get to business results so that we can make business decisions. All right. And so on and so on. I promise not to kind of belabor this. So I want to pause here just a little bit. In circa 2011, I got together with Robert Bruckner, who was one of the lead developers on the reporting services product team at Microsoft. And we wrote a series of what we call report recipes. These were short, kind of recipe format sets of instructions that would present a business problem and then show you how to meet that business problem with instructions for using reporting services. We actually went to, after we had created this initial set of recipes, we then actually had 10 other contributors who would share their recipes with us. Folks like Brian Larson, who wrote his own book, folks like Stacia Meisner, now Stacia Varga, who contributed to our book. And this book was very, very successful. It was a very different format for a book. It was not a chapter book. It was more of a reference book of, here's your problem, and here's the solution that we would recommend. So I want to kind of show you some of these patterns for applying report recipes. Now I'm going to step out of this presentation and into another one. And then we'll get into some demos. This was a conference in mid-November that I presented at in Orlando, the Live 360 conference, where we talked about report recipes. So what is a report recipe? Well, you think about a recipe to cook a meal. You have ingredients. Those ingredients in terms of using software like reporting services could be a product version. What product version would be necessary to apply this recipe? What's the difficulty level? What skills do you need? And then, of course, we had a number of contributors to our recipes. These are a number of the recipes that were published in our book. We set out to do another recipe book in 2020. And we started planning that recipe book in 2019. We had intended to publish that book in 2020. And when the pandemic hit, it was a big distraction for a lot of folks who were kind of doing this on weekends and evenings. And we ended up with about 18 different recipes. It really wasn't enough to publish a book. And so we decided to actually just share this for free. And we've done so on my blog. And at the end of the presentation, I'll show you where to go to actually download these recipes and be able to work through them. So these are the recipes that were part of that later edition of the recipe book. We'll start with the green bar report. It's to create a table-like report that has alternate row colors like the old green bar paper that early computers used, etc. And then down to spatial data visualization, things like heat maps and creating breadcrumbs so you could follow reports and navigate back and forth through reports that have drill through actions to other reports, etc. This is an example of a green bar report. If you're new to reporting services, this is a good expression to kind of cut your teeth on. I'm going to pull up a report where I've done this just to show you what this technique looks like. It's a very simple technique. Bear with me a little bit. My screen's a little bit slow right now. So this particular report is intended to be a very long-running paginated report. Now, as you can see, I do have a column chart sitting on the top of the report, but with many, many pages of table-like data, tabular data, it would be hard to follow all of the records in this report without having something to kind of let your eye follow it. So let me run the report just so I can show you what I'm talking about, then I'll show you how it's done. So this is really Reporting Services 101. Log in here so that we can authenticate against my Azure SQL database. And it applies the filters. It's running a SQL query. And then we should see the first page of the report with the chart up on the top. And then this is the green bar effect that I'm talking about. This is not a built-in feature. In Power BI, when you create a table, this is very easy to do because it's just built into the product. But this gray background shading is something that you have to use an expression to do. If you're new to reporting services, this is an important thing to understand. This product was really architected at a time when developers created reports and analytic experiences. Therefore, you really have to use program code to do a lot of things. Well, this is, a very simple set of program code. Every cell in this table has a background color property, and you can set that to a certain color. So let's go back to the report in design view. And if we were to look at this cell right here, that is bound to the date key column, you can see that there is a background color property that can be based on an expression. Now, since I'm going to use exactly the same expression for every one of these cells that are rendered per every row in the resulting rows returned by my query, I'm going to click on the detail row selector. And because this expression is the same for every one of those cells, we can go take a look at that expression. And this is essentially the expression on my slide. So what this does, and again, this is VB.NET, early version of Visual Basic. And we're starting with the row number function. Now I'm passing the nothing object to that, meaning don't group on anything. That's just a way of saying don't apply a grouping. If there are 1,000 rows returned by this query, then render 1,000 records and go count those. Give me the row number for each of those 1,000 records, as 1, 2, 3, etc. Okay, so now I have an integer. And I'm going to apply the modulus operator to that, which is just the divisional remainder. So go divide the row number by 2 and tell me what the remainder is. So if the remainder is 1, then I know that that's an odd numbered row. If the remainder is 0, then I know that that's an even numbered row. Okay, easy math. And so now I have an expression that is going to be either true or false. Okay, so if it's true, if the modulus, dividing by 2 is 0, I know it's an even row, then return the color light gray. And internally, VB.NET lets me handle strings and objects the same way. So we can just treat that as a string. So that's going to return the color object representing light gray. Otherwise, it returns the color object representing white. Easy stuff. And that's how we get our alternate row. So that's 101. You can take that pattern of expression of using functions like, let me get back to my expression again. Some of these built-in functions, and then use functions like if, and you have to know Visual Basic a little bit to understand that the immediate if, if, means evaluate a Boolean expression. If it's true, then you return the second argument. If it's false, then you return the third argument. It's really the same as the if function in DAX, which is loosely based on Visual Basic. And so easy stuff. And you can apply expressions to all kinds of things. Here's a placeholder object within this text box. And if we were to look at that expression, you would see that I can, do some simple string concatenation. I can reference parameters. I can change data types by using a casting function like this. This is saying, all right, take this integer and cast it as a string, apply the right function to it. Here, I'm just going to take the right two most characters in this. I know that this particular parameter is going to return 6 characters, which is in the format of year, month. So I'm just taking the month off, and etc. And I'm just manipulating a string there. All right, let me jump back to my presentation. All right, so that was the green bar report. Now, I'm not going to take you through all of these. I want to show you some more interesting techniques, and particularly how reporting services or paginated reports can be used in concert with Power BI. There is a data region in reporting services and paginated reports called the matrix. And the design experience within the report builder or SQL Server data tools and Visual Studio is that if you want a fixed number of columns and a variable number of rows based on groupings, use a table. If you want a variable number of columns based on some kind of a grouping, then you would use a matrix. Internally, they're both actually the same object called a tablix. If you want to do this alternate row thing in a matrix, you have to work a little harder because of the complexities of kind of the cross-tabular way that the matrix treats data. It's grouping both on rows and on columns. And so there is a function called running value that we can use to go get an aggregate value, and then we can do some math based on that. I won't take you through all of the nuances of how that works, but we have a recipe that shows you how to apply that so that you can do the alternate row thing within a matrix, and even uniquely with different levels of grouping if you have a drill down report. Okay, so this is the first kind of more interesting demonstration that I would like to show you. And this is, how can we create a paginated or detail report that will show us the details based on a Power BI report? Let me start just by showing you a working version of this demonstration. I'm going to jump over to my Power BI environment. Bear with me just a second as I figure out where I am. Let's do it this way. All right, I'm going to go to my presentations workspace. And we'll open up this report. So as you know, since you're attending the Power BI user group, Power BI is a tool that's really optimized for analytic reporting. Power BI is a tool that is inherently designed to be used in a browser, to be used in an interactive way. It is not optimized for printing. It is not optimized for reports that are very, very long and continuous. That's what paginated reports are all about. Back in the day when reporting services was created, it was very common for reports to be printed, to be exported to Excel, for reports to be many, many pages long. That's not what Power BI is all about. So here's a Power BI report that is really designed to be interactive. It fits onto one page. Sometimes I work with consulting clients who will say, oh, there wasn't enough room on the page, so we need to make this report taller so you can scroll through it. No, that's not what Power BI is all about. But once I've analyzed this data, and let's say I get down to the order quantity for a country and for a year, and so we'll say, okay, down here, I see that I have an aggregate value that represents the total of orders for Canada in 2014. I would like to see those orders. If there are 1,000 orders, I know that it's going to take 36 pages to show all those to me, and that's okay. And so I would like to be able to drill through to a paginated report. You see that I have a link here. And if I click on that, it's going to take me to this other report. This was created with Paginated Report Builder as an RDL or reporting services report. Now in this example, I have a matrix and I have drill down actions here. And I'll show you another example of very, very tall, more verbose reports. But this is based on a SQL query, not a semantic model. So this data, in this scenario, will say that we're dealing with a level of detail that doesn't exist within my Power BI model, and it makes sense to go back to the source system, a SQL Server database, an Oracle database, or whatever. Okay, so that's what we're trying to get to. Now, how do we do it? So let's jump over to my Power BI report builder. Oh, this is the report that I hadn't yet opened up. So bear with me just a bit. Here we go. Sales details. So typically, operational reports are not going to be based on a semantic model. Now, you can build a paginated report that uses a published Power BI model or an Azure Analysis Services database, but it's really more typical to go back to the data source, to go back to, in this case, SQL Server. So let's take a look at that. Here I have a query. Now, notice that I do have a data source defined, first of all. So this is a connection to an Azure SQL database that I have published up in my tenant. And then after defining that data source, I'm going to use SQL and connect to that Azure SQL database just using inline SQL, something I typically wouldn't recommend doing in Power BI, but we don't have any sense of query folding here. It's just SQL. Now, this is a very simple query because I've defined a view, but just imagine that this could be a select all of my columns from table 1, interjoined to table 2, interjoined to table 3, etc. And then I have a where clause with a couple of parameters. Now, when you write a SQL query like this, it could be MDX, could be DAX, and you use named parameters, the designer is actually going to create report parameters matching these query parameters just like this. And so first time I ran this query, it would go create a year and a country parameter. Oops, it's going to cancel. Yes, I want to cancel. and that generates these parameters. Now, those parameters can be passed into the published report in the URL string. And so it's important to note that I have a parameter called country and a parameter called year that are going to filter that query. Now, I'm going to take this report and I'm going to publish it up to a workspace within my Power BI tenant. I've already done this, so I'm not actually going to publish it. But I would go up to my presentations workspace right here, and then I would publish that report. Already done that. Let's close that since we're done with it.
There's a
And
question on the chat. Paul.
yes, semantic model.
Yeah.
So, our friends at Microsoft are really good with coming up with terms that are popular for a time, and then not so much. And I would say that the word semantic or semantic model is one of those terms that was very, very popular at the circa 2012. So a semantic model, think about the way that you create a Power BI. I'm going to call it a solution because really a Power BI report, a PBIX file, consists of queries, a data model, and report visuals. That model is a semantic model. It just simply means that it represents the shape of data in a certain form. And so that's what I mean. A semantic model is kind of synonymous in this context with a tabular model. That is the data model, which either contains definitions of the data, if we're using direct query, or it contains a cached copy of the data with relationships to multiple tables. So that's what I'm talking about. It's the data model that would reside either in an analysis services tabular model or a Power BI published data set. All right, let's go back and now I can pass parameters to this report by manipulating the URL right here. So if you look at the end of that URL, you can see that when I clicked on that link, what I did is I actually assigned this named parameter year to a value, and then I assigned this parameter country to this value. Well, how do we do that? We're back in Power BI land now. So here in Power BI desktop, I have, oh, and I'm sorry, that is not desktop. Here in Power BI desktop, I'm so sorry. I keep jumping over to my browser. I closed this? I must have. I'm a victim of putting my window up on the wrong screen. So what I've done is I have created a measure, and for the purposes of the recipe that I wrote this for, I actually used two different variables so that this report could either be published to Power BI Report Server on-prem, or it could be published up to the Power BI service. So we're going to be using this variable right here. Now, I want to back up and talk through the mechanics of how this was created before I talk through this DAX. So let's just pause there, and I'm going to jump over to Power Query and show you a couple of query parameters that I created so that we could manage some variable values in this Power BI project. Now, whenever I connect to a data source, I will always store the connection string and perhaps the database name, if that might be variable, as parameters. Now, this is the important parameter that I want to show you right here. Here in Power Query, this is my query within my Power BI file, I've defined a parameter called report address. And it's just a string type parameter. And the way that I set that is I just jump over to my browser and I navigated to this report. Let me go back and do that. So after publishing this paginated report from Power BI Report Builder up to this workspace, I ran that report. Now you can see that the parameters are not passed in the URL when I do that, if I just run the report. But I can just grab, I'm just using Control C, I can grab that entire address, which includes the Power BI application up in the cloud, groups, meaning workspace. There's the GUID for the workspace. That's just the identifier for the workspace that I'm in. RDL reports, which is going to give me a list of all of the paginated reports that are deployed to this workspace. And there's the ID or the GUID for that paginated report. Now, you don't need to know all that stuff. You just need to know that you need to copy the address. So let's go back. And I'm just going to paste that right there. I don't want to screw anything up because I know this is working, but that's what I did. I just pasted it there. And then I make a point to expose this parameter as a field. And I forget exactly how I did that. I believe that I just converted that to a table. Yes, I did. So I just took that parameter and I converted it into a table. Again, this is in the recipe, so you can go look that up. And I just closed Power BI Desktop. Are there any other questions while we're waiting for Desktop to open back up?
No, there are no more questions.
Let me rephrase the question. While we're waiting for Power BI Desktop to open up, I would appreciate it if you'd ask some questions.
Will you go through and explain specifically how the parameter travels from Power BI into the paginated report so that that's the piece that my brain is having a hard time glomming onto as you walk through it.
Sure. And, there really aren't a whole lot of technical details to cover there, but I think it'll become apparent with this and the next demonstration that is actually based on a similar technique. So let me talk through this, and if it's not clear, then we'll go back and revisit it. I'm going to open up that DAX window that I was showing you earlier. Now that you've seen that there is a parameter which actually shows up as a table. So I have a okay. I had created a table in Power Query called report address, and that surfaced a field called report address. This again was some magic that I did in Power Query, and I'm going to suggest that if you're really interested in repeating this, you can go back and read through the details of the recipe that walk you through it step by step. But this table, let me go back and actually show you that report address table. It is just for convenience purposes, is just a single column, single row table that allows us to take that parameter and make it available to a DAX expression in the data model. So there it is. It's the same thing that I had pasted earlier. All right, let's jump back over here. Now we go down to this measure that I've defined where I declare some variables. So we've got report address. All I'm doing, because we have to turn this into a single value or treat it as a single value, you have to use an aggregate function of some kind because there's only one report address value, a min or a max or a selected value or even a sum. is going to return exactly the same thing. It's just a necessity in DAX to go use an aggregate function to be able to get that. And we stick that into this variable. We use the same kind of technique just to go get a selected value for the year. Keep in mind that here we have a matrix that is grouped by year and then by country. So there's always going to be a selected value. It's whatever is in context. And so there's the year, there's the country. We stick those into variables. And then we're going to use this expression right here to just build a string. So I'm going to say, if the user has selected a year, I can use has one value to do that, then we're going to, and if the user has selected a country, if that's the case, then I know that this is going to work. Therefore, I'm going to go build the string. I'm going to take the report address. I'm going to concatenate it with an ampersand, year equals, and then the year value, then an ampersand, country, etc. So that just results in this URL that at the end has ampersand, year equals, year value, ampersand, country, and the country value. You can see that if we hover over that link right there in the tooltip, you can see exactly what I've done. And oh, I can see that this is actually using the reporting services version. You can see where I have the RP there. I believe that I've opened an older copy of my file. So the published version of this is not going to include the RP. That's a very subtle difference between the way that reporting services reports address parameters and that paginated reports address parameters. And I'm sorry, I have that reversed. RP is used for paginated reports, and if this were an on-prem SQL Server Reporting Services server, we would not use the RP. Sorry, I got that mixed up. Anyway, so you can see that I've built that address now. And now it's just a simple matter of allowing the user to click the appropriate link, which then sends the appropriate parameters. So let's go back and just demonstrate this running in the service again. We'll go down to Canada for 2014. And there you can see the URL string. And that's really all there is to it. Here in the address, you can see year equals 2014, country equals Canada. All right, any other questions about that?
Is the user able to create these reports on the fly, or is it something that the coder has to encode into the report?
Excellent question. And the answer is that these reports have to be created ahead of time. This is a big, I think, difference between the way that reporting services, aka paginated reports, was architected way back in 2002, 2003, back in a day when developers created reports. The idea of a less technically adept person creating a report wasn't really a thing back then. And so this was something in the hands of developers. So these reports take a little more work than creating a report in Power BI, let's say. So I think it's an important reality that this is a more technical experience.
What is, so in essence, this is basically SSRS, but my organization has a problem with getting the detailed data. What is the best way to use, I guess, this approach so the user can just like click on a map and then get the aggregate data, but then they want to see the row level data behind the aggregate? Can you use paginated in that manner? Because SSRS, I've used it strictly as just like a data dump with specific parameters. So wondering if that's kind of a good practice here, or if that's possible.
Yes, it is, and actually, that's an excellent lead-in to my next demonstration. So let me continue, and I think I'm going to answer your question with this next demonstration. So earlier, I was just about to say earlier this year, but that's not true anymore. Earlier last year, the product team released a new visual for Power BI called the report viewer. Sorry, I'm stumbling on words. The Paginated Report Viewer visual, and it's still in preview. It's fairly mature, which means that I think that it's fairly safe to use in a production setting. But we now have the ability to not only use the technique that I just showed you to be able to drill through or navigate to a paginated report from a Power BI report in context by passing parameters, but we can now embed reports within our Power BI reports. Now let me show this to you working just so you can get a sense of how different the experience might be between using standard Power BI visuals in an embedded data model with a paginated report that is visualized using this new tool. So the report that you're seeing on the right side, the right 2/3 of this Power BI report, is actually sitting inside the paginated report visual. So there's our visual right there, paginated report. In order to gain access to that, because it is a preview feature, you do need to go to Options and Settings and Options here in Power BI Desktop. And under Preview Features, somewhere in here, you will see the paginated report visual. Believe me, it's there. All right, and that enables that. So in order to add this report, let me do this just so I don't break this page. I'm going to duplicate the page. And we'll add a new paginated report. You can see that it wants me to connect to report. Now, the first thing that I need to do is I need to publish my paginated report up to the service. Now, I'll show you the details of this report a little bit more. This is that second report that I showed you that had the column chart up at the top and the table underneath. But once it's been published up to the service, and remember that it has some parameters that I can pass to it, I click on Connect to Report. I'll go up to my workspace. Let's choose that one. And then I can set my parameters. There are two parameters within that paginated report, month number and subcategory, which I know that my Power BI data model that I'm currently working in has fields that contain values that are appropriate to pass to these parameters. So I have a field called month number. And I'm going to say I don't want to use the default. And you know what? I need to actually drag my fields in here. So I'm going to go to the order date. And there's my year and month number. That's the same thing as month number. And what was the other one? That was the product subcategory. And then from the product table, we'll grab the subcategory name. So I have to add the parameters to the field well with the visual selected. Okay, and then here, again, we'll select that workspace. Set the parameters. Okay, now I can select that field, Same thing with subcategory. I can select that field. Okay, you see how long this is taking? That's because that report runs a SQL query that is connected directly to my relational database. And because I'm really more interested in seeing all of the details in this case, now I'm going to delete this and revert back to my finished page now that I've shown you how to do that. Let me jump over here. My priority is to be able to see all of those details. Now, this database contains several million online rows. So for a selected year and month and subcategory, I might have, tens of thousands of rows, which result in several hundred pages. And again, my priority is to be able to see all of those rows and to be able to navigate through those pages and be able to find that detail. I'm less concerned about analyzing this data, and I'm less concerned about performance than I am having access to all of those details. So it's a trade-off, and it's always going to be a trade-off. To make that point, if I click on a subcategory here, I'm immediately going to see the map visual change. If I were to click on the UK, immediately I'm seeing the interaction here in this bar chart. But look how long it's taking this report to run. Again, that's a trade-off because of the level of detail that I have. But the good news is that I don't have to load all of this detail into my data model, into the semantic model that lives within this Power BI project. Okay, let's actually use two different ways of getting to the report. If I were to use the Zoom window, then I'm able to see that full screen here. You can see page numbers down at the bottom. So I've got 393 pages of order detail that don't necessarily exist in my data model, but because this report is going back to the original data source, I don't have to clutter my model, yet I'm able to satisfy the requirement of having all of this data. Now, there's another way that I can get to the report, and that's by clicking Open Report right here. And that doesn't utilize the viewer. It actually just navigates me to the report, passing the same parameter values. And now I'm running completely full screen. And I can do things here in this paginated report that you cannot do in Power BI once the query finishes running. You've got a whole bunch of different export options that Power BI doesn't support. So we could export this to a CSV file without the limitations that Power BI would impose. We can go to PowerPoint, to Word, to Web Archive, all kinds of things. Look what happens if we export this to Excel. Now, if you've exported a Power BI visual to Excel, you know that you're going to get this very plain, unformatted CSV file that you can open in Excel, but by using this method, I'm going to get an exact copy of my report. It's going to look exactly the same as it does here. Of course, it takes a little while to open 393 pages of report data. Let's enable editing, and it's formatted exactly the same way. Now, it's notable that column chart is an image. It's also notable if we go to the very end of the report. So let me use Control End just to get down to the bottom. It's also notable that the totals within the paginated report are not translated to Excel expressions. That's just something that the product team just decided to kind of draw the line there and say, we can only offer so much cross compatibility between reporting services or paginated reports and Excel or any other tool. So it is literally just a copy of that value. But it's such a simple thing to do. I could just choose the column. Let's start there, choose the column, and then go down and summarize it. Oops, let's just try that again. Right. So I don't want to get into the weeds of exactly what the compatibility questions or issues are, but this is such a simple thing to change for an Excel user who's going to be much happier working with this exported copy of the report than they would if they were to use a table in Power BI. So I'll pause and ask if there are questions there. See that we do have a couple of questions. Is there a preference when to use a Power BI dataset versus direct database connection for Pagivated? Yeah, excellent question. So I'm not a real big proponent of using paginated reports with Power BI datasets. I think that there are certainly, arguably use cases where that makes sense. If the published data model, excuse me, my dogs are going to bark in the back. I think that if the existing data model satisfies your reporting requirements, and there are reasons that it makes sense to build a paginated report, whether it's the exportability, or it does naturally support the level of detail that you need, that it would make sense to leverage that data model. I think another consideration would be that if you have row level security implemented in your data model, that row level security is going to be applied using a paginated report, or analyze in Excel or any other way that you would consume the data model. Whereas in this case, I'm connecting directly to my data source, so that security model applies. So I think that there are some viable exceptions to the rule, that it generally makes sense to go back to the data source when you're building operational reports rather than using a data model. This is a very debatable topic. Any other questions? All right, let's go back
Paul,
and yeah, go ahead.
Paul Luxana here. Sorry, follow up on that question, right? So you said if we have row level security in the data, then it's better to use data set. Is that right?
I think that it would be an important consideration. Yes.
Okay.
There's a
Because
whole
we
lot of
cannot apply in paginated report.
So let's say that my data warehouse does not have row level security implemented through SQL Server, through Azure SQL in this case. But I do have row level security rules that are applied on my published Power BI data model, my data set. So by drilling through to a paginated report that is based on the SQL Server database, now my user has access to details that they wouldn't be able to get to through Power BI. So you could argue that there might be a security hole there. But we do have the ability to apply row level security rules directly on SQL Server.
But it's only for Azure, right? If it's like on-prem, or if it's any other database that we're connecting to, like Oracle.
There are a lot of products that have different ways to apply security. Both SQL Server on-prem and Azure SQL do have row-level security mechanisms.
So just follow-up question. So it sounds like you could only really use paginated reports or SSRS if you have read access to the data warehouse. Is that true? And then use that in tandem with Power BI.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So if in the scenario where we're running SQL queries against the data warehouse in this case, then yes, the user would certainly need to have access to that data. Now we can use hard-coded credentials within the report, within the data source. So you want to just create a service account, report user, and embed the username and password within the report connection. You can do that, but then of course we have no way to audit the usage of those reports against the data source. Yeah, there are a lot of what ifs, and it depends in these questions. It's really hard to say, always do it this way or never ever do it that way. So I kind of gave you fair warning that I had, kind of cobbled together material from a couple of presentations, which brings me to the point that this is what I had prepared to show you. What I would like to do is just back up a little bit and talk through the design of the report that we were just looking at. But with that, we're really kind of at the point where we can continue to kind of do some Q&A, and then I can take you to my closeout slides in the presentation. But this was my last demo that I had prepared to show you today. Let me take you to the design of this report. It was one of the things that I wanted to show you. Yes, it was. Give me just a second. Now, there are some limitations if you're accustomed to using reporting services and using some of its more advanced functionality. There are some differences between the way that you would implement solutions in Power BI Paginated Reports. There's a short list of things that the product team have not implemented in the same way that reporting services does things like manages report actions, for example, and data-driven subscriptions, sub-reports. Those are not features of paginated reports, simply because the way that RDL reports are implemented in the Power BI service is different. The architecture is different. Therefore, those features aren't supported in the same way. You've already seen how you can use URL parameters to work around the lack of report actions, and that's a fairly simple workaround. If you were to try to pass very long values in these parameters, you would run into some limitations just because there's string length limitations in a URL within the browser. Now let me show you one such limitation. Now let me just run a copy of this report here in the designer. Now, we've drilled through from Power BI to this detail report. And I would now like to be able to allow the user to select a single day within this column chart and to be able to filter this table. That's something that I've been doing in reporting services for many, many years using report actions. And we can do that. Let me just click on the 18th here. You can see that there is an action. I don't know if you can see this in my screen share, but my mouse pointer changes to the little click finger there. I used to say that you can tell when there's a report action when the report gives you the finger. But we'll click on 118, and you can see that I'm actually navigating to a published copy of that report and passing yet another parameter. So I have a third parameter here called selected date. And that works. Now, the way that I would have normally done that in SQL Server Reporting Services is by using a report action. And report actions are not supported in paginated reports. You have to work around that by using the URL technique that I've already shown you. And so you can see that I'm just using that selected date. So just know that once you open a report up in Paginated Report Builder and you've deployed a copy of that report up to the Power BI service, if you go to create an action on anything, whether it's a cell or a row, or in this case, the series axis of a chart, that the designer simply will not show you report action as an action. You won't be able to go, say, go to this published report. You have to build that URL in order to do that. All right. I think that was pretty much what I had prepared to show you there. Okay. So where to go for report recipes? So if you go to my blog, you will see on this menu Paginated Report Recipe ebook. Again, we had intended to actually publish this book. Let me just go to my blog. And this was all pre-pandemic, and this is one of the things that kind of came out of our, our experience over the past 2 years, is that a lot of people just didn't have the time or the energy or the ability to take on extracurricular activities, and so we actually had a contract with A Press. We were going to publish this book, and that didn't work out simply because we all had a lot of things on our mind as we were working remotely with dogs barking and kids running around the background. So if you just go to my blog, you'll see that we've made a copy of this ebook available for free. There are 3 chapters. We actually walk through kind of the basic building blocks of how to create essential reports, and then you can go to each of these recipes. This essentially is that entire recipe published as a page on the blog with code that you can copy, and then you can also download working copies of all of these reports. And there's actually a copy of the database that we used for almost all of these reports or recipes. I think there are a couple of recipes where we use some of the sample databases that were available from Microsoft, but we created our own copy of the Contoso DW database called Paginated Report Recipes database. So that's available for you to use for free. And with that, let me go ahead and wrap up. So if you have any other questions, I'm happy to stick around, and I'm happy to link with any of you and answer questions offline. I do have a day job, so I can't promise to get back to you right away. And just as I have time, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Yep, I don't see any other questions right now. If anybody has any other questions, please, unmute yourself and then ask Paul.
You bet. Well, thank you so much for attending. I appreciate it. As you're using some of these new capabilities, I'm also interested in learning from your experience. Paginated Reports is new. It's only been available for a couple of years now. The report viewer control is brand new, and it has some known limitations. These capabilities are continuing to mature, and we're all learning together. So, that's the marvelous thing about our community, is that folks are willing to share and willing to, ask questions and answer questions, and I'm part of that. So I would ask you to provide feedback and continue to let me know what your experience is as you move forward. Looks like Mike, you've got a couple of questions.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep. Great. So questions I have is for you and or the group is how many folks have done shared data sets across different workspaces? And the second is the ability to do dynamic column headers on a table in either a paginated report or a regular Power BI report. And that is if you've got a scroll bar at the bottom and you need to move a dynamic header across the scroll bar.
And those are interesting challenges. And so it would be interesting to hear from the group. It would be hard for me to address either of those questions in few words. There are certainly techniques. Dynamic headers are tough to do in Power BI. It's a question that's come up. I don't know if you or others participate in the Saturday morning Power BI live streams that Patrick and Adam from Guyana Cube host. But that question has come up numerous times, and the answer inevitably is, yeah, it's tough to do. There are workarounds, but nothing that's really elegant. We have a lot more latitude. There's a lot more flexibility in paginated reports simply because you can do a lot of really creative things with expressions, but pretty advanced stuff, though. Be hard to dig into without taking a lot of time.
Okay, so I've been with the dynamic column headers. I've been successful with Power Query to Excel, but not in paginated reports or regular Power BI. Just everything seems to have one-to-many issues, no matter how you do it. The real interest I have is if anyone has done shared data sets across multiple workspaces and been successful with that.
I haven't done any shared across multiple workspaces. Within the workspace, yes.
Okay.
But not on the. We haven't tried it yet. Maybe we'll try it and let you know.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Demo and Paul, maybe you and I could talk post meeting about some techniques and some ideas for future meetings.
Sure. And Paul, quick question on this paginated report. What's the best way to distribute it to, like if you create a letter-based kind of a report, like one letter goes to each and every person by email. Is there a way to automate that stuff inside there, or do we need to use like Power Automate or something like that to send it out to the people?
I think the answer is Power Automate today. This is a problem that they have been working on trying to find the best answer to within the product team for a number of years now. So the feature in SQL Server Reporting Services is data-driven subscriptions.
Right.
The Power BI architecture just doesn't support that because data-driven subscriptions are really sit on top of SQL Server, and of course Power BI doesn't sit on top of SQL Server.
Yep.
So Chris Webb did a series of 3 articles. This would have been a couple of years ago, using Power Automate, and I will tell you that it's complicated and it was not easy to implement. In fact, I conversed with Chris a bit after I tried to get it working in production, and he told me in so many words that he was just playing and didn't really have a fully baked solution. And I don't know that we have a really good answer right now. The APIs are better than they used to be, and this isn't something that I've gone back and revisited. So, yeah, good question. Don't have a real good answer right now.
Yeah, hopefully soon. So,
yeah, I hope so. It's a big ask. This was I'm good friends with Chris Finland, who's been running the paginated report product team at Microsoft. Chris has yet moved on to the Synapse Analytics team and has yet to pass the baton on to a replacement. So it'll be interesting to see how that lands. I know it's very high on the priority list, though.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Back to the question of dynamic columns in Power BI. I think I'm safe in repeating this because I heard it in a session that was not under NDA. Recently talking to Will Thompson, who is on the Power BI desktop product team, the question about dynamic columns came up, how to dynamically change row headers in a table. And let's say that you have a generic data set where there are custom fields, field 1, field 2, field 3, and we want to rename those fields. Because a column header in a table cannot yet be based on an expression, there wasn't an easy way to do that. Will's answer to the person asking the question, and this was less than a month ago, was, hold on, I think you'll be happy with a feature that should be released in the next couple of months in Power BI Desktop. That's all I know, but I can repeat him because it was a public session.
Is that coming to the cloud, or is that coming to the local desktop server?
I would bet, because this is always the answer, that it would be, well, I know that it's a feature coming to, allegedly, because I haven't seen the feature. I only know that Will alluded to it, is that because it would be released in Power BI Desktop, I would assume that it would eventually be available in Power BI Report Server. But as you know, Report Server lags behind the Power BI service by several months.
Right. So the way that I've implemented that today, Paul, is with a measure. And the measure has a formula of what I want the column header to be. And that could be based on the data or something that I know. The challenge is, if you have a scroll bar, where do you put the value in the measure? And today, the only place available is a card, and cards don't move with the scroll bar.
Oh, I see. So you're placing these cards or another visual kind of over the top of a table.
Correct.
Yeah.
When you have a scroll bar, the cards stay where they are and they don't move with the scroll bar. And that would be a great feature for Microsoft to implement, unless there's a way to change the name of the header directly with a formula or a value.
Well, I've told you all I know about future plans to implement that, so I don't really have any more to offer. I think we're definitely going to see a capability that will make that easier.
Thanks.
You bet. Nothing comes to the server version. So Ed, I'll comment on that. Microsoft wants us in the cloud. And I don't think it's underhanded by any means. And I heard Amir Netz use these words. It was a few years ago at a I think it was a Past Summit presentation. He essentially said, we will implement the latest features. We will innovate in desktop and in the cloud. That's our focus. That drives our revenue. There are lots of reasons that we're cloud first. If it works out, if it is convenient for us to bring those features down to Power BI Report Server or any other on-prem product, we will do that to support our customers, but that's not our priority. And he's just very matter of fact about it. It wasn't that they're trying to manipulate, the customers. They're just saying it's not what we're all about anymore.
All right.
Really brought the whole room down when I said that, didn't it? All right, Damu, I'm done.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you very much, Paul, for presenting at our user group tonight, and it was awesome. And as usual, it's very, very informative and very thoughtful for you to present to us. So it's great.
Thank you. You'll find kind of previous versions of the previous presentations I've done that are related to this up on my blog, and I will within the next couple of weeks have a kind of finished version of this presentation up on my blog as well. So watch for that if you like.
Okay, sounds good. And our next month's meeting is on February 7th. And also we'll be sending out the information about the Power BI Summit soon to all of you, all the members of our community, and you can register over there. But that's all we have tonight. And if anyone else has any questions, otherwise we can close the call. Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
everyone
Bye.
for attending. Thank you. Bye-bye.